Cyprian Ivanov, what do you think of Vokes versus Arthur Murray, Inc., 1968, where a dance school cajoled an elderly woman into spending over $31,000 through false praise, awards, and trips to other school locations? Does your time in Scientology offer any additional insight into the dynamics of the situation? Hey, Cyprian, thanks. I actually printed out and looked this case over, and of course, you and I had a little discussion about it through email. And this is a very interesting point, and I was actually quite intrigued by the case law aspect of this, because this was a case, again, from 1968, where basically an old woman got love bombed, and that's kind of what we use. That's kind of how we describe this whole process, or at least how I've thought of it. I know love bombing is a very specific thing where you have a person and people come and just flow admiration and love and happiness at this person, and it can be a very acute instance of it, but there can also be kind of a chronic, longer term situation of love bombing, and this is associated with sales, and this is heart and soul of how Scientology operates. So I was quite intrigued by this case and the fact that she had taken this Arthur Murray dance studio to court for fraud, and at first it got thrown out by the trial court because they said there's no cause of action here. You know, you bought stuff, you signed contracts. You know, you paid the money. You know, whatever that expression is for let the buyer beware, right? Caveat emptor or whatever. So okay, but the appeals court said no, this case needs to be looked at. Now, I couldn't find what the final verdict on the fraud ended up being, but the important part of the case law is that it was kicked back and said, no, this woman needs her day in court. This is uncool. And keep in mind that this woman paid over $31,000 in 1968 money. I mean, she really got taken advantage of badly. And she apparently came into the dance studio, you know, started doing some lessons, and within just a few lessons started getting pushed and told how wonderful she was, how she was an above average dancer, how this was so wonderful. And she kind of fell for it and kept buying, and eventually bought this huge package of over 1,000 hours of dance lessons, right? And she's 81 years old, right? So a little bit, a little bit much that this woman was investing this much in it, but she was being encouraged and sold and told by people that, and this was important for the court, for the case law, she was being told how good she was and how she was going to get better and better by people who she believed were authority figures. Any objective look at this, and you would say, well, this is just a sales guy, this is just a dance instructor. These are not necessarily people who are, you know, high authorities in being able, in convincing this woman that she is indeed going to become a great dancer. So there wasn't really any objective authority there, but she viewed them as authority figures, and there was money involved in these transactions. There was fiduciary responsibility, and so this became a case of, yeah, no, we're gonna try this under as a fraud. All of what I just said applies to almost every single sales cycle, or reg cycle, we would call them in Scientology. The regs were brilliant, and I was a reg for a while, so I'll throw myself in the mix here on this. That we learned how to be in ARC with our prospect. In other words, be, understanding of them, listen carefully to everything they were saying, care about them, be very interested in them, and really heavily encourage them to do the Scientology bridge. And we were helped in this by Hubbard defining hard sell. Right? Hard sell is getting people, being ruthless about getting people to pay for and do the services that are going to rehabilitate them as a Thetan, right? We believed that this was a game of eternity, and we were selling people the key to their eternity. So we were very hardcore about it. In fact, one time a drill that we did to practice the correct attitude, this was a recruitment and sales drill, and it was the situation we were presented with was your friend is a drug addict, your best friend has become a drug addict, and he is about to get on a bus. And you know that if he gets on that bus and goes off to wherever he's going, you're never going to see him again. He's going to die in the gutter because he's going off to New York or whatever, or LA. And it's now or never, right? So you got to convince this person right here, right now, to not get on that bus. And that was the spirit with which we entered into doing these training sessions or drills. And at first, everybody was kind of treating it as like, sort of a ho-hum. And the guy said, no, stop. He goes, listen, you guys don't get this. This is life or death. That's what you need to be treating this as. So that was how we were trained. And we kept drilling and practicing until we really were quite hardcore about it. But when you're sitting down across from Mrs. Smith or Mr. Jones and you're going to sell them Scientology services, you can't sit there and talk to them as though they're about to die. So it becomes instead just part of your thinking and attitude and the level of intensity that you bring to the sales cycle. But you also have to infuse this with a lot of kindness and happiness and the love bombing. You want to give them a lot of admiration. People love it when other people admire them. They become putty in your hands, they really do, and you got to, of course, be able to do it without being false. It can't be false sincerity, right? You got to really mean it. And I didn't find as when I was being a Scientology reg that this was incredibly hard to do, because I was very serious about Scientology. So these guys, were obviously taking this old lady for a ride, and a lot of the sales and the reg cycles that occur in Scientology are people being taken for a ride. I was only a reg for about half a year. I don't remember taking anybody for a ride that way. Certainly not knowingly, but I did meet other regs who had, and after I left Scientology, of course, I've heard or been told through email or direct conversation with people of hundreds of instances of this since I've left, right? And it's gotten like so much worse. So that's what are some comments on this and how it relates to Scientology.